When Jimmy Valentine walked out of prison after serving 10 months of a 4-year sentence, the warden handed him his pardon and advice: stop cracking safes and live straight. Jimmy took the pardon in a tired way, claiming he had never cracked a safe in his life, and headed straight for a restaurant to enjoy his first taste of liberty. He returned to his old room at Mike Dolan's cafe, where Ben Price's shirt buttons still sat on the floor. Jimmy slid back a hidden panel in the wall and dragged out a dust-covered suitcase containing custom-tempered steel drills, punches, and clamps. A week later, a safe in Richmond was burgled for $800. 2 weeks after that, a safe in Logansport was opened for $1,500. When a bank safe in Jefferson City was cleaned out for $5,000, the losses were high enough to bring the investigator Ben Price back onto the trail. Price recognized the autograph left behind, the clean way the tumblers were punched out, and the specific use of clamps to jerk out combination knobs. He knew Jimmy's habits of working alone and his taste for good society, and he set out to find the elusive cracksman. Jimmy was a specialist who thrived on quick getaways and long jumps across state lines. Between his high-end tools and his ability to blend into any crowd, he had become a ghost that standard law enforcement simply couldn't track. Jimmy eventually climbed out of a mail hack in Elmore, Arkansas, looking like an athletic college senior. He headed toward the local hotel, passing the Elmore Bank with his heavy suitcase in hand. At the corner, he passed Annabelle Adams, the banker's daughter. Jimmy looked into her eyes, and for a moment, he wasn't scouting the building or calculating the response time of the local police. He simply watched her walk away. He checked into the Planters Hotel as Ralph D. Spencer and began asking the clerk about the local business climate. He claimed he was looking for a location to open a shoe store, and the clerk, impressed by his clothes and manner, encouraged him to stay. A year later, Ralph Spencer was a success. He owned a flourishing shoe store, had won the respect of the community, and was set to marry Annabelle Adams in 2 weeks. Even the old banker, Mr. Adams, had come to approve of him as a future son-in-law. Jimmy sat down in his room and wrote a letter to an old friend in St. Louis, asking him to meet in Little Rock so he could give his tools away. He wrote that he had quit the old business a year ago and wouldn't touch another man's dollar for $1 million because his life was now tied to the woman who believed in him. In Elmore, the persona of Ralph Spencer had become the reality. The tools that had defined Jimmy Valentine were now intended to be handed off and forgotten. On the morning Jimmy was set to leave for Little Rock to buy his weighing suit, the family gathered at the bank. Mr. Adams wanted to show off the bank's new vault, which featured a patented door with 3 solid steel bolts and a brand new time lock. Unseen by the group, Ben Price lounged in the bank lobby, leaning on his elbow and watching the scene through the railings. He had tracked Jimmy to Elmore and was waiting for the right moment to make the arrest. During the inspection, 9-year-old May playfully shut her younger sister, Agatha, inside the vault. She shot the bolts and turned the combination knob, exactly as she had seen her grandfather do. Panic hit the room as Mr. Adams realized the clock hadn't been wound and the combination hadn't been set. The vault was airtight, the child was screaming in terror, and the only person who could possibly open the door was over 100 miles away in Little Rock. Annabelle turned to Ralph, her eyes full of anguish, and asked if he could do something. He stood there with his suitcase of tools, knowing that using them would prove to everyone in the room, including Ben Price, that Ralph Spencer was a lie. Jimmy looked at Annabelle and asked her for the rose she was wearing. He took the bud from her hand, tucked it into his vest pocket, and began to pull up his shirt sleeves. He commanded everyone to move away from the door and opened his suitcase flat on the table. Whistling softly to himself as he used to do when, at work, he laid out his shining drills and clamps while the family watched in total silence. Jimmy's pet drill bit into the steel. In 10 minutes, breaking his own professional records, he threw back the bolts. Agatha was pulled from the vault, safe but collapsed from the fright. Jimmy put on his coat and walked toward the front door. He heard a voice call out, "Ralph!" but he didn't stop. At the door, he found Ben Price standing in his way and told the detective he was ready to go. Ben Price looked at him in feigned ignorance. He said, "Guess you're mistaken, Mr. Spencer. Don't believe I recognize you." Then the detective turned and walked away down the street. By using the skills of a thief to save the family that loved him, Jimmy Valentine effectively destroyed his own disguise. In that 10-minute crack of the vault, he risked his freedom to save a life, and in response, Ben Price let Ralph Spencer walk back to the life he had earned.